Welcome to bowl season here on wagertalk.com. I am Kelly Stewart at Kelly in Vegas, joined today by the stat daddy, Ralph Michaels at CalSportsLV on Twitter. And please make sure you follow his new Instagram that I'm basically in charge of, Ralph Michaels WT. You can get all of Ralph's TNA charts there, as well as his homepage, wt.buzz/RM. All right, Ralph, bowl games. Boy, do we have a lot to break down. This weekend is Army-Navy, but next weekend starts basically 3 weeks of football almost every single day. We have a ton of bowl games. We have a lot to break down. Let's get into it.
Well, Kelly, the first thing first, bowl games have changed a complete 90 degrees from, let's say, 5 years ago. The number of players opting out, the number of players that are going into the transfer portal. When they released bowl lines, I used to make probably 70 or 80% of my bets the first week prior to Army and Navy. Now, the max I'll bet on a bowl game is probably 60% what I used to, and then take the information you're getting, make adjustments, and then upgrade the bet or downgrade it if you need to. So players not playing. I want to give a shout out to Action Network. If you go to their site, they have by far the best lineup of players opting out. And we have to remember, there's different reasons. Some players just opt out. Some players are going to the NFL, so they don't want to get injured. We also have to remember suspensions, because the grading period ends the beginning of December. That's why the regular season ends at that week. And then by the time players play in the bowl game, they have their grades. And a lot of these seniors in their final year, they know they might be getting drafted. Those grades really don't matter. We do get a lot of late suspensions when those grades become final. So those are all things that you have to take care of. But again, Action Network is by far the best list that I've ever seen. They update it often. They even have the number of plays. So knowing who's playing is the number one most important thing.
I would agree.
Number
Ralph.
two.
Sorry, Ralph. I was going to just interject there. I keep telling people, as far as the bowl season goes, for me personally, now some other people might disagree, but I want your opinion. We always talk about on Wager Talk getting the best of the number, but I really feel like in bowl season, getting the best of the information is almost as important, right? Like, let's use K-State last year, for example. Brian Kelly comes into LSU, tons of opt-outs, tons of transfer portal news. They end up being a completely massive underdog. The bookmakers get buried. K-State covers the opening number, the closing number, and most of the end game number. And that's because they could not adjust fast enough. Those types of situations, at what point in time is it a no bet? As what point in time, as you said, would you bet that other 40% there?
Well, as long as it's a fair trade where I think there's value. Listen, almost every major team that's not in a major bowl is going to have some players sit out. But you have to remember this. You have to rely on your coaching staff. You have to look at coaching records, because you still have 4 weeks to prepare. Now, you look at Ohio State's list. I mean, they were a sizable favorite. What happens? Why are they a dog now? Well, I mean, McCord's leaving, and you look at the numerous players that are out. They may have 7 or 8 NFL players not playing in this bowl game. Well, it's okay to replace 1 or 2 players, maybe a few players in one situation. But when you're missing that type of talent in a bowl game, it's just a situation that I'm not going to play. So I make my bowl number. You start making adjustments. You look at who the coaching staff is, if they're in this role, and what they can do. Now, the rest of the Ohio State players, I will tell you this, they'll be motivated to be an underdog in this game. But, you look at motivation and you look at bubble burst. Ohio State, final drive, they beat Michigan. They're in the national championship. Georgia, in it against Alabama. They don't win. They would have been in the national championship. Oregon, another team, bubble burst. And I do want to mention this, Kelly. This is the final year we're going to have that situation. I have a couple systems we're going to talk about later. Teams off wins against conference championship games, teams off losses at conference championship games. Next year, we won't have the regular season one-loss bubble burst. we won't have the conference championship loser having a bubble burst. Because if it were a 12-team playoff this year, like it would be next year, guess what? Oregon would be in the playoffs, Ohio State would be in the playoffs, and Georgia would be in the playoffs. So, as we're mentioning this data this year, remember, this is the final season for those things moving forward.
That's a very good point as far as motivation goes there, Ralph, because being in the playoff, and we've seen it with FCS, right? The FCS playoffs are a lot more competitive than some of these bowl games. But I would like to touch on that Oregon Liberty line, right? It opened 13 and a half, got bet up to 16 and a half. I'm not saying I'm going to get involved here. And there's some rumblings that Willie Korn may have a new job as offensive coordinator somewhere else. There's a lot of what ifs here. But as far as the bubble burst goes, right? If Oregon had won the Pac 12 championship, that would have probably guaranteed their entry into the college football playoff. Now that they're on the outside looking in, playing an opponent, while albeit undefeated Liberty, it still says Liberty on the front of their jerseys. Why did we see this one get bet up so early to turn around and make me want to take Liberty? Do you think it was one of those fake outs? Do you think that Oregon was just that highly power rated?
Well, Oregon, prior to their loss to Washington, was my top rated power rating team. If you look at them statistically, they were plus 2.5 yards per play. That blew out everyone in college football. So Washington played a great game. I thought Oregon would beat Washington in the Las Vegas Bowl. But you have to remember this. Yes, you're playing in the Fiesta Bowl. Yes, you're playing in a New Year's Six Bowl, but you're still playing a group of 5 team. And that's tough for the kids to try to get up for. You're one play away or several plays away from the national championship. Let's remember this. Last year, Tulane beats USC. In 2021, Cincy covers against Georgia. 2017, UCF knocks off Auburn. 2016, Western Michigan gives Wisconsin a great game, either pushes or covers the spread. Houston beat Florida State. Boise beat Arizona. We have a strong record for these group of 5 teams doing very well ATS-wise in the New Year's Six Bowls.
One last thing I wanted to touch on before we get into some of these charts that you have for us. As far as coaching goes, we've seen Manny Diaz now take the head coaching job at Duke. We've now seen K-State offensive coordinator Colin Klein go to Texas A&M, right? Those are just a couple of examples. There's obviously a lot more movement that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. What are your thoughts on either losing your head coach before a bowl game, right? And they have an interim head coach, or losing a pivotal piece such as an offensive coordinator? How would you assign that? How do you handicap that? Help me break this one down a little bit.
You know, Kelly, it's a question I can't really answer. I've gone back and I've tracked coaching changes. Heck, we had a game 2 years ago where the head coach left, the OC left, the DC left, and the special teams coordinator left. And that team came out and covered the spread. It was amazing. But to me, losing one coordinator does not change my thought process at all. The head coach is still there. There's an assistant offensive coordinator that knows the plays. Maybe they haven't called plays before, but in the bowl game, it's so unique anyway. So if there's a cluster of coaching, I obviously give 2 negatives. If there's only one position that's leaving, that really doesn't change my decision very much, unless it's the head coach and he called the offense, where you're losing 2 play callers in my mind. So you have to look at each one individually, and you have to make a determination. But I have not been able to quantify if you lose a head coach or an OC, it's a positive or a negative. So again, I don't want to try to guide you into something that I don't have data for. So you have to make that determination yourself.
Yeah, that is unfortunate, but maybe those are just games that I'm going to avoid. Again, I hate to say it. Ralph, I was with you. I had a lot of people asking me on Monday, Kelly, you're not handicapping the bowl games? I go, for what? You mentioned Action Network had a list of the players that were opting out. Another kid, I retweeted his Google spreadsheet of the kids in the transfer portal. It is a freaking mess right now. So for me to try to sift through it in a hurry to make some bets that I am not that confident in, I think it's okay to pass and take the right amount of time here to kind of work through these. So let's get into some charts here. But first, I want to talk about bowl game favorites. I feel like there is just a ton of dogs that start to cash in some of these bowl games, whether it be motivation, player opt outs, whatever that looks like, Ralph. But you actually have it broken down by how big the spread is.
Kelly, while Joe Public likes to bet favorites, if you look at bowl games, I'm going to think Joe Public actually likes to bet dogs. And often what happens is, you have 5 or 6 bowl games that first Saturday. And it seems like that first Saturday you have a lot of overs. Then all of a sudden the bowl totals start creeping over and the lines start climbing and you see the adjustment. So number one, I just want to share basic data. So I went back to 2015. Bowl favorites, Kelly, are 54.2% against the spread. And if you just bet every bowl game over under, 48.9% over, 51.1% to the under. When I went to bowl favorites, up to -7.5, up to -7.5 for the 54%. But when you look at double digit bowl favorites, Kelly, like Oregon, like you talked about, while they've won the game straight up 82.1% of the time, double-digit bowl favorites have only covered 35.9%. But when you have a double-digit bowl favorite, the over-under is 66.7%. So double-digit bowl favorites, dog and over. Single-digit bowl favorites, slight lean to the favorite and the under. So nothing you're going to base a bet on, but it's good to know the numbers that you're working with going into a season, because a bowl game is much different. When you have a regular season team as a double-digit favorite, they play their first and second string, sometimes their third. When you're playing a bowl game and you're a double-digit favorite and you have a huge lead, it's a fun time. You're in the Bahamas. Unless it's a national championship type game, you're letting your 3s and your 4s and your seniors get in to get some action while the other team is really trying to continue to score and have some fun. So number one thing out of all this, check the players that are playing and be careful playing those double-digit bowl favorites.
All right, let's talk the promotion that you and Dave Koken have over at Wager Talk.
Well, I'll tell you what. Mr. Dave Koken is a legend. He is number one all time at Wager Talk and Bowl Profit. I am humbled to be number 2 behind Dave Koken. We've done this annually. It gets great results. We appreciate it. We enjoy giving you the discount. You get every bowl game from Dave, every bowl game from me for just $149. That's both of our bowls for just under $75 each. You can go to my page or Dave's page, click on that special, and I'll start releasing bowl games this upcoming Monday, a week in advance. So you want to be on early to be able to take advantage of those line moves.
Love that. Dave is a legend. And yes, Ralph, you do have to play second fiddle to Mr. Koken. That is unfortunate. But you do have another chart, which warms my heart. We're going to talk about bowl games and how they break down per conference.
Well, the chart has a lot of information. And as I always do, this will be in the bowl PDF guide so you can look at it more closely. So the chart has 2 parts. The left-hand side, bowl games since 2017. I did exclude the COVID year, Kelly, because there were some teams that had 3 wins that were going to bowl games. So it wasn't the traditional. On the right-hand side are the bowl games by conference for each of the last 2 years. You see the top part in black are all the bowl games. The blue are bowl favorites. And the bottom are bowl dogs. So the one thing that sticks out to me, look in the blue section, Kelly, the bowl favorites, you have straight up ATS and over under. Look at the very bottom. The SEC in the last 5 years has gone 10, 18, and 1, 35.7% against the spread. That's something that I wouldn't think of. So many times you think, oh, the SEC is the strongest conference. They're a favorite.
Oh, Ralph.
They win their bowls.
Oh, no. I love you. You always hit me with the hardest questions on Bet On It. Things that I never, if you would have said, Kelly, who is one of the worst conferences in bowls, it's the SEC. They're overvalued every single year. Probably rightfully so. Bookmakers know that they're going to get money in on them. Damn it, Ralph. That was a layup for me.
I apologize, Kelly. The Pac-12 right behind them. Look at the Pac-12 as a bowl favorite, 5-11-1. And then you get down to being a dog. Listen, we know CUSA has been the worst conference, but take a look at the very bottom. When the CUSA teams are a dog, they're 18-10 over under the last 5 years, and they're 9-2 over under the last 2 years. Why? Well, some of those teams have good defensive numbers when they're playing the crappiest schedule available, when they're playing conference games. When they're playing in the bowl games, they give up a lot of points, but they also can score some points. So a lot of data to take over. This would only be one check mark for me. Having a conference that's a very good bowl team over the last 2 years or last 5 years, or a lot of overs or a lot of unders, I'll give a check mark to that team in that category, but no more than that. It's not really going to change my needle. It'll just say maybe a conference that I like, a bowl game. It might go from a 3.5 to a 4% release, that type of situation. So while the data is interesting, remember every season is unique and these numbers do change, but there are some noteworthy numbers to mark down and take a look if they continue to happen this season.
Okay, Ralph, your bowl guide is going to be chock full of TNA. You can get that over at wt.buzz/RM. That'll be out on Monday. But give us some little TNA breadcrumbs to get us to Monday.
Kelly, just to give you a situation, I have 6 situations that I want to share with you here. There will be at least 18 in the bowl guide. So if you're a fan of this TNA, you are going to have at least 12 more situations in that bowl guide that will be free, that will be up on Monday. So I'm going to start off with my number one favorite system. And we talked about motivation. One thing I didn't mention in the motivation is a 6-win team. Now, a 6-win team, you have to remember this. The players, the coaching staff, everyone involved with that team, one of two things happen after your bowl game. You win your bowl game, and forever moving forward, that season was a winning season. You lose the bowl game, moving forward, that season was a losing season. So 6-6 bowl teams, very, very strong. So if I look at teams that have exactly 6 wins, playing an opponent with more than 6 wins, they cover 62%. If I look at teams that have 6 wins, playing an opponent more than 6 wins, and they're either a dog or a small favorite, those teams are 69.4%. And if I look at bowl teams with 6 wins and their opponents have over 6 wins and they're a favorite, they have covered 72% against the spread. And in the bowl guide, Kelly, I will have all the bowl teams this applies to. I will say this, the 72% system for 6-win teams, Georgia Southern against Ohio and Virginia Tech against Tulane. System 2. Fire away, Kelly.
Let's talk about, I'm curious. So when teams end their season on a high note, right, albeit against the spread, let's talk about back-to-back ATS winners and back-to-back ATS losers headed into bowl season.
Not a big sample size. I was surprised. I went all the way back to 2005, and there's only a handful of games this applies to. Only one team this week, Bowling Green and Minnesota. Bowling Green comes in on a 2-game ATS win streak. Minnesota comes in on a 2-game ATS losing streak. But those teams like Bowling Green that are hot ATS versus cold ATS have only covered 23.1%. So System 2 says to fade the MAC Falcons against the Gophers.
That is a very small sample size there, Ralph. I expected to see more. So we're going to fade the MAC, looking at that one. Next up, we have back-to-back straight-up losses as a dog. Do you have more of a sample size here?
I do. This went back to 2007. 17 ATS wins, 29 ATS losses, and 1 push. So a team that limped into their bowl game, but they were supposed to lose. They were an underdog in both games. Teams off back-to-back losses as a dog, back-to-back straight-up losses as a dog, 37% against the spread since 2007. This situation says to fade Georgia State, fade Minnesota, fade Boston College, and fade Rutgers. So I do want to mention, Kelly, one system says to fade BG, one system says to fade Minnesota. Basically, what I do is I have every bowl game listed. I do the positives for the bowl games that have positive ATS systems. I do the negative records for the teams that have negative ATS situations. And then I weigh them out. Which ones are stronger? Which ones are weaker? Which ones do I think make sense? So when you see the bowl guide, you are going to have several situations where one system favors one team or fades one team, and one system favors or fades the other team. So do expect that. It's going to happen quite a bit.
Sorry, Joe. I couldn't get myself unmuted there. We're going to have to fix that. Okay, Ralph. Let's talk about conference championships and teams that lost as a favorite. We already used Oregon as an example here, but we could also use Georgia.
Kelly, we talked about the motivation factor and the bubble burst of losing your conference championships. So if you look at teams that lost as a favorite in their conference championship, like Louisville, like Tulane, like Georgia, like Toledo, and like Oregon. Now, we know they're not all the same type of bubble burst. Tulane might have got to a group of 5 team. Toledo maybe had a chance. But when we look at Georgia and Oregon, those are the two that jump out to me. But bowl teams, this doesn't matter if they're a favorite or a dog. Just bowl teams that lost their conference championship as a favorite have gone 31.6% since 2012. Add in the double-digit favorite negative record, and you clearly see that's a play. And oh yeah, by the way, they are 63.2% to the under. So while the offense may have fun and scored, the defense that we're accustomed to for those teams that play in conference championships doesn't hold true in the bowl. Again, 63.2% of those games have gone over the total.
Okay, we got 2 more systems here, Ralph. Let's get into the service academies.
Well, this is team specific, so it's not truly a system. And it is strong enough for me, though, that I will not play against an armed forces team as a dog or a small favorite. But when you look at service academies with the lines between the tens, so exclude being a huge double-digit favorite, exclude being a double-digit dog. Since 2009, Kelly, service academies are 18-4, 81.8% against the spread. That applies to Air Force and against James Madison. And remember this, these service academies play a lot of seniors. These are players that are going to go on to protect our country. They don't lose focus going to a fun city, having the parties. They are still work structured. They are regimented. They play an option. It's very difficult if you're not a completely focused team to prep for that option the first time you maybe played it in a decade. So to me, it's something that makes total sense. And it is something, even though it's team specific, that I will either play on a service academy in this price range, but I will not play against them. Again, 18-4 service academy ATS records between the tens.
All right, and last but not least, Ralph, we already mentioned the Pac-12 and, well, they're not very great record in bowl games, but let's talk about them if they won their last game.
Well, actually, it's if their opponent won their last game. So it doesn't matter what the Pac-12 team did, but if they're playing a foe that won their last game, then they're in for trouble. Now, I do want to credit Mark Lawrence and the Playbook newsletter. I did steal this from him. No problem, Mark. I appreciate it. And I know you said it was okay to talk about. But when Pac-12 teams are playing in a bowl since 2016, off an opponent as a win, they have gone 3-22 against the spread. That is 12.0%. Now, it cashed again last year. I don't bet this. I don't blindly bet this, even though it's a 88% system fade. But it is something to take a look at if you're playing those Pac-12 teams. And again, remember, this year, the Pac-12 mentality is so much different. You know, UCLA's playing Boise. They're going to be playing in the Big Ten. Oregon State, obviously, they're going to be the only Pac-12 team left. Arizona and Utah to the Big 12. So the Pac-12 will be interesting to pay attention to, because are they really Pac-12 teams at this point, or are they already Big 10 and Big 12 teams now that the regular season has ended? But just an interesting number to end this session on. And again, I'm looking down the list. There's 12, maybe 14 more that are all 63% plus or 37% plus fades. That'll be loaded, a bunch of loaded information in that guide.
As always, thank you to Ralph for all of his data, trends, angles, and situations. I got my pen ready. I finally found it, Ralph. It's been missing for a couple weeks. Thank you for all your assistance this bowl season at Cal Sports LV. Make sure you guys are giving Ralph a follow on Twitter.